All right, I think we will get started in that case. So welcome everybody to the third Azure Landing Zones external community call. Thanks to those of you who have joined. I know that it is a bank holiday in some places around the especially in the UK, like it is for me today, and I may have accidentally scheduled this call on a bank holiday. So my wife is massively impressed with my organisation skills. But hey, we're still here. We still want to run this for the community, and of course we will publish this in all the places like YouTube and on our wiki on the repo, so that people can find this and catch up with this later if they're not able to join today. So please continue to share it around, and we'll put links on socials and all of that stuff so that you can find it when it's all up and available. So today we're going to give you a bit of a brief update on all things Azure Landing Zone since we last spoke, which was back in November, for those of you that joined the last call. So some of this may be new, some of this may be old, and then we'll get towards the end and we'll open it up for some questions and answers, as always, until sort of 5:30 UK time. So just under an hour to go. But yeah, you'll notice that everybody's been muted and on no video. So if you've got any questions or anything as we go along, please feel free to use the chat. We've got a few of my colleagues here from all around the globe. So we've got Jeff, Eric and Jan, who are not on a public bank holiday today. So yeah, please do feel free to use the chat, and the team will definitely give everybody a hand and answer any questions. We can cover them at the end if they need a discussion. Okie dokie. Right, so just as a you may have noticed, this meeting is being recorded. So if you don't want to partake and have yourself recorded, and you'd rather just catch up on the recording, then this is your cue to leave the meeting. But yes, we are recording. And today's agenda. So we've gone through a welcome. We're going to go through a bit of a what's new all up across a lot of the Azure Landing Zones implementations and documentation and all those things that we look after, and then we're going to do a bit of a Terraform module update. It's actually the wrong way around, and then a bit of a Bicep update, and then we'll open up for Q&A. As I've said, at any point if you have a question, please do feel free to use the chat, and we may stop and discuss that point right there if it's pertinent to the conversation. If not, we'll hold it to the end and we'll make sure we get that covered for you. All right, so first up, hopefully you all have this bookmarked and favorited and is one of your pages that you keep up to date with very often. So this is our what's new page in the enterprise scale repo, and it's your single place to stay up to date. So we manage this, and we're very conscious that every time we make an update, regardless of whether it's in the Terraform module, in the Bicep tooling, whether it's into CAS documentation, that we're just giving everybody a single place to come and stay up to date. So if you want to remember a short link, it's aka.ms/alz/what's new, and that will link you off to all the relevant places that have had recent updates. So one of those to keep bookmarked and to share with your customers, and share internally with all your colleagues and share around the wider community, because it's a great place to stay up to date and plugged into the fire hose. And on the What's New page, you'll find a ton of new documentation that we've released in sort of the last quarter. So we'll take a very brief step through them here, and then I've got them all loaded up, and we'll take a bit more of a deep dive through all of these documents in a few minutes. So the first one we released, so Simona in the team and a few others worked pretty hard on this one around planning for virtual machine remote access, right? There's obviously various ways that you can provide remote access to virtual machines, whether that's via Bastion, whether that's over VPN or Express Route, whether it's via just-in-time access. There's plenty of ways and plenty of considerations to be had there. And it was something we were seeing that customers were looking for our guidance on. So we published this documentation. So if you look in the table of contents on the left-hand side, you'll notice it's under network topology and connectivity, and it's just here under resources, and you'll find the new article for Plan Virtual Machine Remote Access. And in typical fashion, you'll see this when we go through it in a bit more detail, but we have a bit of an overview, and then we have our considerations, and we also have our recommendations beneath that, but we'll show you that in just a second. So one to go and read and check. Some of you may think it's a fairly standard documentation, but it's actually pretty nice to see all the different ways that you can have it, and depending on the architectures or whether you've got hub and spoke or virtual WAN, what's the recommendation in line with Azure Landing Zones. Moving on to another document that we released sort of just at the beginning of the year, I want to say sort of February time, with our colleagues in Fast Track that we did a lot of work with this on, is our Azure landing zones for ISVs or independent software vendors. So we obviously realised that independent software vendors may need to treat their Azure landing zones environment a bit differently to an enterprise would, or a more enterprise-based customer. And therefore, we've worked with the Fast Track team who, for ISVs, to write a set of specific guidance that really walks you through what are the key things you need to consider, what are the differences that you need to think about, in terms of management group hierarchy, tenant structure, policy application, how you're going to do sub-organization, all of those sort of things that you would think this might be a bit different in an ISV world. We've worked through and documented all of those pieces. So it's a really nice article. And again, we'll step through this in a minute, but you'll notice that this one is under our implementation options, which is where you'll find it inside the Azure Landing Zones documentation. And we step through, 3 scenarios, so different types of ISVs. So whether it's, that it's all SaaS hosted and there's nothing hosted in the customer environment, whether it's the dual model where there's a bit hosted in a customer's own subscription and then it reports back into an ISV subscription. And then there's obviously the model where it's only deployed inside of the customer's model, so more like your marketplace items, those sort of things. And we talk about the considerations that you need to think about with each of those. So for any of you that are working more of that ISV world, or you have customers that you're helping that are more ISV aligned, we've got a great set of guidance there that I would highly recommend going to have a read. It's quite a lengthy page. I think it said about 17 minutes to read there from the screenshot, but very, very valuable, and it's in nice chunks, so you can take it in digestible chunks as you need to. But we'll step through that in a bit more detail in a second. But a great document to go and read and keep in your mind. This one, I believe we released just before Christmas, so just before the turn of the year. So this one is all about adopting policy-driven guardrails. So obviously it's one of the key principles of enterprise scale, or Azure landing zones, as we're now starting to use. And policy-driven guardrails really means, using deny or using modify or using deploy if not exist policies to actually enforce and do things for those customers' environments where you've applied those policies with that type of effect. Now, we heard loud and clear from customers. I think Jeff heard, in every survey that we did with customers, that some customers aren't quite ready to use those sort of more restrictive effects in terms of deny or modify or deploy if not exist, and especially around deploy if not exist or modify, where the deployment action could actually trigger something which would mean that something else would happen in the customer's environment. So, we'd actually deploy something if they forgot to do it, like diagnostic settings, or, if they provisioned a new subscription, we would enable Microsoft Defender automatically on that subscription, right? Some customers weren't ready for that. They wanted to be alerted about it and wanted to sort of have it in audit mode effectively, but they didn't want us to automatically remediate that. Some customers have compliance or regulatory compliance frameworks that doesn't allow anything apart from a human that has gone through change control and all of those good practices inside of their business to make any changes to their environment. So they actually can't use these effects. That it takes a time to go through sort of a security sign-off and review and that sort of process before they're even allowed to enable these sort of more advanced effects. So we worked alongside a lot of internal parties in Microsoft, including the policy team that have reviewed this documentation as well. And this really talks you through how you can say, deploy if not exist and modify are certainly the North Star, certainly the goal for most customers that we would want them to use. But how would we, for those customers that aren't quite ready or can't, or want to take a slower approach into adopting policy-driven guardrails, how can we help those customers? So what we've actually provided here is a load of guidance about how to use the things like the enforcement mode on policy assignments, so setting things to do not enforce or disabled so that you still get the auditing, but you can still have the ability to perform manual remediation tasks, so you can sort of get to on board there. And we'll step through this doc in a minute because we've got a really nice sort of 3-phased process that helps our customers to go, disable all of your deploy if not exist and modify or deny policies, turn them to, or set their enforcement mode to do not enforce. And then we take them through the process of some scenarios of how they can slowly test and adopt these and then grow their confidence to fully enabling all of these advanced policy effects as they mature and get more comfortable with the tooling. This document has proved really popular since we released it. And it's great to be able to talk through your customers these more advanced effects that they might be a little bit more unaware of and unsure of, and help them build that confidence and that muscle to be able to just go, yeah, we want to use these things to manage and help us govern our environment following the Azure landing zone design principles of policy-driven guardrails. So we'll definitely step through this one again. You'll find this one underneath our design areas in resource organization, and just at the bottom there in adopt policy-driven guardrails, and it's linked to from various other documents because we think it's important and something a lot of people are looking for. So yeah, definitely go and check that one out. And by the way, if you haven't already, all of these links should be clickable, so you should be able to grab all of those, but we'll make sure that you get all the links and access to the presentation afterwards within a couple of days when we upload this all to our repo and on YouTube. All right, more documentation updates. So this one is very, very new. I think this one's maybe 2, possibly 3 weeks old. So I actually wrote this one myself and did a lot of work with the team on leading this one. And this is really to help customers who maybe see the conceptual architecture of Azure landing zones and go, well, that's not for me, right? This doesn't fit for us. We're not an enterprise. Corporate online don't work for us. We don't want customers to believe that is if you don't deploy Azure landing zones exactly as we say and have exactly the same management group structure and exactly the same names, that you're not doing Azure landing zones. In some instances, if you deviate too far, then you are not following Azure landing zones as an architecture. But this document helps you explain of places where we see from the Azure landing zones team where we deem it's safe and compliant in speech marks to customize the architecture and how we would go about it. So in true Azure landing zone documentation fashion, lots of bullet points, lots of examples, lots of diagrams saying, hey, this is where to customize, this is where not to customize, and this is why. This is where to go wider instead of deeper in terms of management group hierarchy and why. And we'll definitely dive into this one in a bit deeper detail in a few moments. But definitely go and check this one out. Again, proven really popular already, and especially a lot of you in sort of the partner space who may be thinking, hey, look, we want to tweak this, but we want to stay aligned to Azure landing zones. This is definitely one to go and check out for you, and we would love to hear your feedback from anybody on this. So feel free to use the right at the bottom on the GitHub issues. If you've got any feedback for the document or things that you think you need adding or changing, feel free to raise GitHub issues. That will go through the CAF content team, and that will get back to us, and we definitely will pay attention to those and reach out and make any changes that we feel are required. But yeah, this has proven really popular, and we'll step through this one in a bit more detail in a few moments. Actually, we will step through it just now before we dive into some Terraform stuff. So let me just open up a browser and share that instead. And if somebody wants to give me a thumbs up just to make sure they can see a GitHub page. Fantastic, thank you. All right, so as you can see here, we're on our What's New page on the repo, just in the wiki and right at the top. And what you can see down here is in our April, you can see links to all of these new documents that we've provided recently. And obviously, if you scroll back further through, you can see all of these various updates that we're going to talk through that we've made. But yeah, just reinforcing, this is the one place to come, your one-stop shop to find out what we've been up to in the Azure landing zones world. So definitely bookmark this page and make sure you come back to it. So we'll just whistle through all of these pages that we've spoken about very quickly. So the plan for virtual machine remote access. So, we have our typical considerations, things to be aware of, NSGs and RBAC configuration for Bastion if you're going to centralize it, what our recommendations are, some architecture diagrams around how this all fits into play in different topologies, very, very short, sharp and snappy from a documentation perspective, but gives you what you need to be able to have this conversation with a customer. And, we're obviously leading with Azure Bastion being the sort of preferred way to handle these things, being following our design principles of Azure Native, but certainly not saying it's the only way, and giving people some examples there and some use cases for Bastion if it's not to be the only use case for connecting to remote virtual machines. So yeah, definitely go and check that one out. We then spoke about our ISV documentation, and as you can see, we've got lots of detail here around saying this is for ISVs and It's not for your more enterprise and standard customers. This is definitely for a certain type of customer, being an ISV. And then we talk around the sort of the three different ISV deployment models, right? So pure SaaS, where everything's hosted in the ISV subscriptions; in a customer deployed model, where there's something deployed, like the application or the ISV offering is deployed inside of the customer subscription, and there may be some talking back or some hosting of packages in the Azure Marketplace or in the ISV subscriptions. And then we also talk around the dual deployment SaaS model, where there's that you deploy something in the ISVs, and that interacts with the customer's ISV deployment of that product on a telemetry basis, or maybe it's doing a bit more than telemetry. So these are the sort of three typical models we see, like virtual desktop managers. So thinking along the lines of Cloud Jumper, Nerdio, all of those sort of things, you can think about it's more one of these dual deployment models where there's constant interactions between the ISVs, Azure hosted resources, and stuff deployed in the customer's Azure subscriptions as well. And then once you get down past that and you have an understanding of these different deployment models, you're getting to the Azure landing zones design principles and implementation considerations. So we talk about Azure AD tenants and our guidance there of trying to stay centralized, but you may find that in these models they need to have a separate tenant for the SaaS hosting of the platforms for compliance reasons. So we talk about when that is a good idea to split, but also calling out that using multiple is can increase management overheads and is not recommended unless you really need it. So again, trying to really enforce that this is for ISVs, not for every customer to adopt. So only it is for a certain type of customer. We then talk around management groups and how this would work. And as you see, there's quite a lot of words here to read, but I would say that it's one to definitely take some time over a coffee and digest, because there's lots of really good, valuable information here if this scenario is applicable to you. And we talk around how it can look for following option A and option B, and you'll see this common pattern of option A and option B following all throughout the documentation. And then we talk around platform management groups, landing zones management groups, environment specific management groups, and and how this can all look. So, and we call out yes, we don't recommend dev, test, prod management groups typically, and that's something we talked about on our very first community call externally, and is in our FAQ. But for ISVs who may be handling tens of thousands of subscriptions per environment per product, this may be something that actually is very useful for them, but isn't applicable to other customers because we don't see it at that sort of scale, and it's a very different and specific kind of use case. So lots of really great guidance here, and then we get right at the end and we sort of have a holistic overview of both approaches, whether for taking in all that guidance and considerations that we've given above, what do two options look like? So we have a minimal and a comprehensive, and obviously all of these diagrams are downloadable and expandable, so as you would expect from our documentation. So and then some links off to some stuff that you may have seen on channel Azure Friday recently from John Downs and with Scott Hanselman around architected multi-tenant solutions. So linking off to there because we worked with that team to build this guidance for ISV. So definitely well worth a read. Even if you're not in the ISV space, there's it gives you a really good understanding of sort of the concepts behind how we could customize it and why and what not to do and all of that stuff, and really fits in with our tailoring guidance as well, which we'll go to next. So this tailoring guidance here is more for your standard customers, so enterprise customers, non-ISVs, where they're hosting their own workloads and they're going, hey, Azure landing zones is great, it's what I like, but I don't want corporate online. I might want something different, or how do I expand it? How do I tailor it to meet my own needs that we have? So we talk around giving you a foundation of Azure landing zones is built to represent the 80% side of the 80-20 rule. It's built to give you that good start, but it's not meant to be perfect for everybody, and we realize that, but it's certainly a very good foundation for everybody to follow. And then you can add your own sprinkling of flavoring on top to get to where you need. And we really talk around helping you break down what an archetype is in terms of Azure landing zones. So we talk around an archetype really describes what a landing zone needs to be compliant from its scope. So whether it's, what policy assignments are applied to it, what RBAC assignments are to it, what centrally managed resources do we host and manage in there. And we give you a really good understanding about how we designed this and what the thought process was about building each of those management groups, or archetypes is an easy way to refer to them, and why they exist. We also link back here to our various guidance on policy-driven governance that we've spoken around, and adopting policy-driven guardrails. And we talk around what we have today, right? So some of the built-in archetypes that we have to try and get you on board with, the reasoning for why we've created what we've created, and hopefully get you in line with where we are in terms of our thinking, so that you can then go and tailor that and customize that hierarchy as you see fit to meet your own needs, or your customers' needs, depending on the use case. So we talk around what Corp's for, what's online is for, what Sandbox is for some common well-known pieces of the architecture that you can get on board with. And then we talk around scenarios where tailoring might be required. So we talk around two aspects here. We talk around an application landing zone archetype customization, which is this part in blue. And then we talk around a platform landing zone custom or tailoring requirement, which would be the pieces in orange or yellow here. So we take, for example, in the application landing zones, PCI as a requirement for a certain set of workloads. And we talk around, there's a safe way to meet this requirement by creating another management group called PCI underneath landing zones, assigning an additional policy to it to just make that section of your hierarchy the PCI area, because it doesn't need to be everywhere. And then, obviously putting the subscriptions that need to be PCI monitored and compliant beneath that, so that they remain compliant. We talk about something like a security requirement underneath the platform area. So the SOC team require a dedicated subscription to do some of their own stuff, and it shouldn't be shared with management for security reasons. So we talk around, again, how that can look, and we give you a final picture of what this could look like and how you can customize this. And I think this is probably the most valuable part of the documentation, which is our points to consider, and giving you some sort of hard and fast do's and don'ts, effectively. Like, it's not tailoring the hierarchy isn't mandatory, it's not required, but it's possible, and this is how to. Don't recreate your organizational hierarchy, teams or departments in archetypes. So, as we've seen before and talked about lots via Azure Landing Zone communities, that don't build your internal organizational structure and management groups. Don't do dev test prod. Don't go too deep, because you'll add unnecessary complexity, and maybe expand horizontally instead of vertically. So go wide rather than going deep. And only create new archetypes in the highlighted areas, because these should be the only places that you really need to build those new archetypes. The rest are fairly cut and dry. So yeah, some really, really good guidance here that we've built together as the team, and would highly recommend you go and check that out. And obviously, we've talked around here the adopting policy-driven guardrails article a few times that you've seen linked to, and you'll see here that we say why we use Dyna Modify and how we use it inside the Azure Landing Zone architecture to do things like Microsoft Defender for Cloud enablement, activity logs automatically configured, diagnostic settings, Azure monitor agents, all of those sort of things. And then we talk around, like, you may need to disable these, you may want to take it slowly due to some regulatory compliance policies, you've got a strict change control process, you're still upskilling, or you have some organizational requirements that says, hey, actually all of these workloads should be compliant before they're even deployed, and don't take a dependency on policy to do the cleanup for you. And we really give you this sort of three-step approach, or three-phase approach, which is disabling the Dyna Modify policies, automated actions, so setting that enforcement mode to do not enforce, enabling it on a reduced scope, and then finally enabling it everywhere. And we really give you sort of a breakdown on how to do it. So for customers that want to do it in the portal, how they could do it here, how you can do it in ARM templates, and obviously that can be translatable into other implementation methods. And we talk about, you could actually stay in the fully disabled of automated remediation permanently, and that's fine for some customers, and it may be a hard requirement. But we talk about some considerations to do when you get to that stage, because maybe using the enforcement mode isn't the best way to do this for long term, because you don't get activity log alerts and all this sort of stuff. So we list out all of this in a table to make sure that you make the best decision based on your requirements. And we actually link off to how to react to Azure policy state changes using the event grid and stuff like that. So if you are going to stay in this state long term, how you can make it manageable and scalable to maybe take log tickets if people do become non-compliant, and make sure those things are followed up on so they don't just get lost and left behind. We then talk about phase 2 around some common scopes where you may choose to enable it, so maybe on your sandbox, or maybe on a non-production workload, or maybe on your canary deployment if you've done an enterprise scale canary deployment, and some example policies to use and how to test those, and again how to enable it and reintroduce those automatic remediations. And then really, how do you do it? Taking it cool, you're happy, you want to do it everywhere. This is how you then go and do it. So really good guidance. Obviously quite long, but it's in digestible chunks again, as always. And again, feel free to have a read and give us your feedback by using the bits at the bottom of these pages, hitting this page, and that'll get to us, and we can take action from there and reach out. So yeah, so lots of great documentation updates that have been going on in the last sort of 5-6 months since we last spoke. But some well-needed content that we've heard loud and clear from the community that is needed. So hopefully that's just all music to your ears, and you're all pleased to see some of those new documents that we've released. So let me just grab a quick swig of a drink. So moving on, more documentation, and we actually spoke about this in, I think, our first external community call as well, around which Terraform approach to use to deliver Azure landing zones. We've got 2 modules. We've got the CAF Terraform landing zones module, and we've got the CAF enterprise scale module. Which one do we use? Which is the best approach? And we've actually spent an awful lot of time, the team have working with the CAF Terraform landing zones team and the Terraform PG inside of Microsoft to work out what's our guidance, what's the best approach for customers for this. And we've now written a specific document that talks about some what considerations you need to make and what one's more applicable to you based on your requirements, and helping clear up some of that confusion that was existing out there. So definitely go and check this one out. This went live also a couple of weeks ago, so very new. And we would love your feedback on this, and we'll dive into that documentation page in just a second. Whilst we're on the Terraform theme though, hopefully you all saw that last week, just before Kevin managed to escape for some well-needed holiday, we released version 2 of the Azure Landing Zones Terraform module, formerly known as the CAF Enterprise Scale module. So just as a small note, we are in progress of renaming that from ESLZ to ALZ for this module to help bring more clarity. So you may have noticed that it's now referred to as the Terraform module for Azure Landing Zones, or the Azure Landing Zones Terraform module. That is the same module, but we're just slowly going to be starting to rename that over the next few months, so keep an eye out for that. But most importantly, we've brought virtual WAN support to the module. So this was much asked for, has taken a lot of development. And the reason we've gone straight from, I think it was 1.4 or 1.3 that we're on, to version 2 is because we actually introduced a lot of other changes as well, and bug fixes and improvements and enhancements that we've heard as we've worked with more customers, and we've heard from the field and the great community that's been built around the Terraform module via the issues and discussions that we have on there, that there was actually some other things that people wanted to see added and some more flexibility added. So we've actually added a lot more in there, and we figured that actually it's probably a bit of a big release to just be a step upgrade and sort of an incremental release. It's more of a major release, so hence why it's gone version 2. As always, we've provided fantastic documentation around what has changed and what the upgrade path is, so that you can go through that with your customers or your own deployments to work out, upgrade to the latest version, do a Terraform plan, make the required changes as per the documentation, and then make that upgrade when you're ready to. So, obviously our guidance is always to try and stay as up to date as possible with the latest version of the module, but we understand that sometimes that might be possible. Sometimes you might get some interesting errors based on a customization that we may not have catered for. Hopefully we've covered them all. We've been out for over a week now, and touch wood, we haven't heard of any big issues or upgrade issues yet, but if they do happen, we're here to help. So please do raise an issue on the GitHub repo, and one of the team will definitely get in touch and we'll give you a hand of trying to work through any issues that you do encounter. But hopefully we've got them all covered in the release notes or the upgrade guide. And with that, I'll just quickly go to these documents around Terraform that we've been mentioning so that we can have a little look through them. So first off, we've got the Azure landing zones Terraform CAF documentation around which ones to use. So you'll find that beneath the implementation options. And then you've got this whole section here about deploying Azure landing zones with Terraform. And we talk around, a picture paints 1,000 words, right? So what the ALZ Terraform module does, what the CAF Terraform landing zone module does, and which one, hopefully this will help you make a decision around which one's the best one to use for you. And then we talk around, so it's the right approach. So if you're just looking for Azure landing zones and that's all you want to consume as a Terraform module to deploy and manage that manager group hierarchy, some policies, and then optionally those connectivity resources and management resources, if you want to via the module, then we absolutely recommend that you use the Terraform module for Azure landing zone. So the CAF enterprise scale module, as you'll call it from your code sources. And then, however, if you're looking for a more all-encompassing sort of central approach to manage everything end-to-end and an entire framework of how to do Terraform within an organization that's highly opinionated, then we would absolutely recommend that you go and check out the CAF Terraform landing zones framework. But be aware that it is not they're not apples and apples. They're not fair to compare. It's just unfortunately the namings have caused some confusion here. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Good question, Ian. I take it you're referring to sort of the data side of things that we have for Azure landing zones or enterprise scale for that. If so, we have seen that as a requirement been requested once, I think, on the GitHub issues, and that may have been yourself, and apologies if it is, that I haven't remembered. But if not, I would highly recommend go and create an issue on the Terraform repo to log your request as a feature request, and we'll link them all up to add more evidence. And it's certainly something we will consider and speak to the team that manages the data side to see if it's something we'll add to the module, or whether we help build another module to do the data side of those things that can work very well with the Azure Landing Zones Terraform module, because we want to keep that Azure Landing Zones Terraform module fairly small and fairly, it does one thing very well rather than doing lots of things not so well, it's probably fair to say. So we want to make sure that we're very focused on what its scope is and what it isn't. So it would certainly be a separate module, but definitely something we're happy to consider. So please do make sure you get that request logged on the repo, and we'll maybe reach out and have some further conversations about requirements there. And then just moving quickly into the Terraform registry. So you'll now note that we've got version 2. Here, and you can see that people are starting to use this. So it's had 108 downloads this week already, so that's good in a day. And you'll see here that if we go to the repository, you'll see that actually here we've renamed here, so the Azure Landing Zones Terraform module. And you'll see if we go to the repo and we go into the releases on the right, you'll see that we've got version 2 here, and you'll see that we've listed out all the new features that we've added. So things around virtual WAN, things about renaming. We've added some telemetry in here to understand how the module's being used, and we've got details on how to disable that if you want to. We don't know anything about you as a customer. We just literally know what features you're enabling to help us focus our development efforts, and know connectivity is being used versus management, or policies being used extensively. Just gives us some good indications of where to go and focus next. Things around Azure firewall and firewall policies. There's been lots of stuff going on there. VPN active gateways. There's a couple of requests, and a lot of these have been based on customer requests or issues that have been logged for things that have been missing. So we've added those. You'll see a lot of fixed issues as well. We've also included support for the Azure RM provider version 3, because that came out a few weeks ago, maybe 3-4 weeks ago. And we had to release a hotfix to pin to a specific version, but we've now upgraded all the resources in the module to support version 3, so you can now remove that pinning to the older versions of 2.99, etc. So you can go to version 3 with the module as well now for Azure RM. And then we talk around what breaking changes there are. So, we've upgraded the minimum version to 3.0.2, the minimum version for Terraform to 0.15.1. And then we talk around, if you've got want to learn more about how to upgrade from 1.1.4 to 2.0.0, we've got a whole document listed here with some similar information, but then your required actions in terms of, how to make the change, what you can expect to see for each of the resources, depending on how you've configured this. So the team has spent an awful lot of time and effort putting all this into the documentation. So please do go and read that as you go and upgrade. And as I say, if you have any issues at all, as we say here, you need help, please just let us know by GitHub issues, and we'll do our best to help you and get you going again. But hopefully everything's covered in those documentation examples. So yeah, some really great work there from the team. All right, let me flick back to the presentation. And we've got 23 minutes left, so going fairly well. All right, so let's just go to this new page. So I think we really talked about this last time, but I just wanted to make sure that it was covered again. So we have two FAQs for the Azure landing zones or enterprise scale, about one that is focused and based in the CAF documentation that is focused on the architecture and the implementation method, the architecture and the why and more of the concepts behind it. And then we've got one that's in the repository that's more focused around the implementation, like, if this error message appears, then this is the thing to go do, or how much does deploying Azure landing zones cost? All of those sort of questions are covered in the more implementation based one here. So if you're looking for the why and the architectural stuff, go and check out this one. And if you're looking for more of the, well, this has happened, what do I do now, or the more of the what, then go and check out this one here. So definitely worth a read, and they're both linked to from the wiki, and they're cross-referenced to each other. So as you'll see here in the architecture one, if you want to see more stuff about implementing, you'll get linked here, and if you want to look more about architecture, you'll get linked back here. So if you find one, you'll get to each of them. And if you're looking for the dev test prod approach guidance that we commonly talk about and have a lot of conversations around, that's in the architecture based one that's towards the bottom, so definitely go and check that one out. But yeah, just wanted to call those out and make sure everybody's had a chance to see those and read them and has got them bookmarked, because lots of useful answers there. And also, if there's stuff missing that you'd love us to document and talk about more, please do raise issues, and even feel free to try and contribute yourselves, and we will work with you to make sure that that's correct and we agree, and we can get that published as well, because we're all about getting the community involved and contributing. So yeah, if you see something or want something added, please let us know via the issues. All right, so we've made some various updates to the Azure Landing Zones Accelerator experience, so the portal experience, if any of you are using that. Some of the things that we've added since November, since we last spoke, is that we've added telemetry, and you'll notice this across all of our implementations now. They're all using the same method for implementing telemetry, obviously slightly different ways for each of the code bases, but similar technology underneath. And all of them can be disabled, and we have documentation very clearly documented on how to disable that. So if you're using the portal experience, you may have seen this new option appear in the portal on the very first blade. But again, we know nothing about that apart from it's been deployed and what region maybe you've been targeting. But it just helps us know what's being used and which features are being enabled and what isn't. So just really good for us. So if you can, please do leave that enabled. It really helps us know what's being used. But absolutely fine if you need to disable that, not a problem at all. We've increased the preparing to launch phase. So some of you may have seen this when you've done a deployment that you get like preparing to launch. It used to be 20 times. That now happens 30 times. And that's like an artificial delay in ARM that just basically does a looped deployment of nothing, just to basically make a delay effectively in the deployment between the policy definitions being created and uploaded, and then us trying to assign those policy definitions that we've just created, because some of you, as you may have seen from issue 902 on the repo, that sometimes you get that policy scope not found or can't be applied at this scope because there's X, Y, Z, and you're like, well, the management group exists and the policy definition exists, but why can't you create? It's all to do with the replication issue that we're working with the Azure engineering team and the ARM team and the policy team behind the scenes. But we've made this increase to try and improve that scenario, just to give the platform a little bit more time to catch up and replicate before we go and try and make those assignments for policies that we've just created. So nothing too major. You shouldn't really notice it. Maybe you've not even noticed it, which is fantastic, but just be aware that we have increased that a little bit. So maybe as another 3 minutes to a deployment, but nothing too major. And this is only for the Azure Landing Zones Accelerator portal experience, not Terraform or Bicep. We've also added a warning message to, if you select dedicated subscriptions for platform resources, so management, connectivity, and identity, you'll now see this lovely orange or yellow box on each of them, but above the subscription selector, to make sure that we're calling out that if you're using dedicated, you must select different subscriptions. You can't use the same subscription for connectivity, identity, and management. If you're using the dedicated model, you need to select the single platform subscription option on the first blade if you do need to use the same subscription. Obviously, we would advise using multiple for various reasons, and we link to that in the portal experience and links a way to go and read stuff about that. But we've seen a few failed deployments recently from customers and partners that have been using the same subscription in the dedicated model, and that will cause a deployment failure because it tries to deploy and move the subscription between management groups, and obviously that's not the desired architecture. So we've made a note there to call out. We haven't added any validation yet to stop you from being able to do that, because it would take some more effort. So we've added this as sort of a stopgap, and hopefully this solves a lot of the confusion. If we do keep seeing people getting caught on this piece, we'll look to add some more validation to make sure that the subscriptions aren't the same being selected. But this is sort of our first attempt at seeing if this is enough to solve that for customers. So yeah, so some things you may have seen appear in the portal experience. We've updated the deployment for an Azure Firewall Policy Premium SKU. So if before we deployed an Azure Firewall, and we obviously deployed a policy with that, we would deploy a standard one. So we now deploy a premium one if you select a premium firewall SKU, and obviously you get a standard one if you select a standard SKU in the hub and spoke connectivity model. And we've also updated to deploy an Azure Firewall policy for customers using the VWAN connectivity model as well. So some firewall policy changes there. And then there's been the general policy update stuff that's been going on across the platform since sort of November. So we've replaced the deploy default UDR policy with a more flexible deploy custom route table option, which Federico and the team spent a great deal of time testing and making work. And there's some great documentation on how that's used. So if you want to enforce a custom route table that has a set of specific routes, including the default route, we've now got a policy that's great for looking through those things and making sure that the route tables are the same for more than just the single default route. We updated the deploy budget policy to include the flexibility of adding your own budget name instead of it being called budget set by policy by default. That is its default value, but you can now overwrite that with a parameter. Jan added the audit event to the deploy diagnostics for automation accounts. So, simple things that we're hearing from the community that we're adding. We renamed the deploy ASCDF config policy, so as your Security Center Defender config policy, to MDFC for Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And we updated it to version 3 to align to the renaming that happened in the platform. So nothing to really worry about there. And we've obviously kept up to date with all the Defender SKU changes as well that have been going on over the last few months. So that policy is as up to date as it can be. We updated the deny subnet without NSG and deny subnet without UDRs to version 2s, because there's various ways that you can create subnets within the Azure platform, and various ways even within the portal. So sometimes if you create it like within the creating a virtual machine blade, it behaves differently to if you were creating a subnet on an existing VNet. And there were a few gaps where somebody could create a subnet that maybe didn't have a UDR or an NSG on it. It would obviously then flag as non-compliant once a scan had happened, but we want to make sure we're capturing all of those from the start. So we've updated that so that all of those scenarios are captured and tested now. So highly suggest updating to that. And we also added a new custom policy definition called deny VNet peering to non-approved VNet. So we have policies in there to deny VNet peering or deny VNet peering outside of a subscription. We've now added a policy that says, hey, deny VNet peering unless it's to this specific VNet. be the hub VNet, for example, right? That's quite a common use case where you do want to allow peering to it. So yeah, we've added a policy for that because there's not one built into the platform. So we've added one for you. So that was really recent, maybe in the last sort of 3 weeks. So go and check that one out. And for any of you that are AZ advertiser fans, so keep an eye on Julian Hayward's work, which is some great tooling out there that I certainly use daily. We've started to integrate and work with Julian to add some support for Azure landing zones / enterprise scale into there. So if you want to know what all the policy definitions are, all the policy initiatives that we do inside of Azure landing zones are, you can now use the AZ advertiser to find all of those. So you'll see that we've got the enterprise scale graphs on both the definitions and initiatives. And if you go to the type column on any of the tables, you'll see that this new option, you've got ESLZ, and you can filter for all of those policies for ESLZ there. And as you would expect from AZ Advertiser, you can see all of our policy definitions and what it does and the changes. Changes is something we're working on, so soon you'll be able to see the change history in here as well, like you can for built-ins. But today it does a scan every 24 hours, so you can stay up to date with what's going on there on the latest changes that we're making. So another great way to stay up to date with what we're doing in the policy front. That's it for updates. I suppose just to carry on that theme, we really want you to let us know if there's issues, bugs, feature requests. Please feel free to create them on any of our repos. And even if you're not sure which repo, create it on any of them and we will move it around to the relevant repo. But we just want to hear that feedback. So feel free to let us know. And if you want to update docs or you want to contribute to the code, feel free again. And we're happy to work with you to make those contributions work. And I know a few of you in the community who are on this call have certainly made some contributions to the Bicep code, and we massively appreciate that. So please keep the good work up. All right, on the home stretch, so we're just going to whistle through some Bicep updates. So hopefully you all saw we released this back in February, I think the first or second week of February. And a lot of the team on the call from the ALZ side are here today that contribute and manage this. And so, lots of great work's going into this. We've got 214 stars, and we've got a great number of contributions from external contributors. Some of you who are on the call today, so thank you to those. And lots are still coming, which is great. We had one submitted this morning as well. So yeah, really love to see those, and we'll get onto them tomorrow. We are currently at complete coverage for code, so there is no feature gap. So we've got virtual WAN support, we've got all of those things that are there. So from the ALZ architecture, there is everything you would need in line with the portal experience and Terraform. So everything's in line. We're currently at version 0.6.1, so we're still in a sort of a public preview release because we are introducing some breaking changes still here and there, but we're working towards obviously getting towards a V1 as soon as possible. But current estimations are sort of maybe the end of the FY inside of Microsoft, so July-ish sort of time, but that's a really rough ETA at the moment. It's certainly a goal, but not a commitment. But these are all production ready to use, right? So just last week, I helped a customer get these deployed with our local teams and a partner, and they had no problems at all, made a few customizations that they needed to make, and away they went. So absolutely fantastic to see, and that's exactly what we want to see used for them. We've created a new consumer guide that talks around how you can use them and ways that you can consume them, and what we would say, you can go and customize these. They're built to be taken as sort of examples and help accelerate you to get going, not to be like you must stay within these tight boundaries. We want you to go and take them and customize them if you need to. We'll also, if any of you tuned in with Johnny Chips, one of the MVPs in the community, I was with him last week doing a Schooled in ALZ Bicep session. So if you want a bit of a deeper dive into the whys and the wheres and the how do you use it, that episode will hopefully be coming out later this week, if not next week. So keep your eyes peeled. And we've got lots of exciting stuff planned for content and YouTube stuff for the ALZ Bicep, and a lot more ALZ stuff coming to the external community as well. So keep your eyes peeled there. But again, please keep let us know how you're getting on with it. If there's any issues and anything you'd like to see, then please let us know. And again, we're happy to collaborate and contribute with you. And just a few little bits and pieces. So you may have seen these slides very early on when we talked about ALZ Bicep, and I just wanted to provide you a little bit of an update on this. So these big high-level orchestration templates, so everything we've got on the left-hand side here of this line is there today. We have modules for all of these things, and you can deploy them in your own sequential order as we talk about in our documentation, and you'll get the expected outcome. these big higher level orchestration templates don't actually exist today because there was a bug that we discovered very close just before releasing. So issue 5371 in Bicep, which has literally just been fixed. Did you lose me? Can everybody hear me okay? Cool. Okay. All right. Hopefully that was just a temporary dropout. So yeah, there was issue 5371, which we found sort of a validation issue in the ARM engine. So we've been working with the team to get that fixed. That was literally fixed a couple of weeks ago and rolled out. So we're now currently testing that, and we will be working with that in our next sprint, so sort of next month onwards, to hopefully provide these. But these orchestration templates we will provide at time of GA or when we go V1. But obviously they're nice to have, and we don't think that'll be a very common use case for a lot of customers. They want to schedule them and orchestrate it themselves in the ways that we have available today. So you'll do individual deployments and all of those sort of things in terms of you maybe use a pipeline to do a deployment of each of the individual modules today individually, or maybe you build your own orchestration files like this. So you'll build an orchestration file that does it all yourself, which wouldn't have worked up until last week. Or you maybe build smaller groups of modules, which we're starting to see as a common pattern that we're deeming mini orchestration modules. And we've actually got a contribution from the community that was submitted today about one that we've been discussing for a while. But you may choose to group together your management group, subscription placement, and policy definitions in a single Bicep template that is an orchestration file, and then it deploys the child modules from that. But we really want to keep it flexible as possible, right? We want to give you and make sure that you'll implement it in the way that's most flexible for you and your customers, or your own deployments. And you may choose to have a bigger sort of orchestration file that orchestrates submodules that then orchestrates even more submodules, right? So we really want to give you all of these options as possible, and we'll probably add these to some documentation in the consumer guide soon to talk about these in a bit more detail. But just know that it's up to you how you want to orchestrate this and deploy this. And we're also going to be working on an ALZ Bicep Accelerator repo that will be a repo that you can clone. And it will have ready to go sort of production ready GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps pipelines ready to go, so that you can sort of have things like pull request checks going on and validation and making sure you've got approval gates and all those sort of things that you would want in a more production ready deployment that we don't provide today out of the box, but certainly something we want to provide going forward. So that's something we're working on as well going forward. So again, things that you can do yourselves today, but we want to make as much of that as easy as possible for you to accelerate as fast as possible going in the future. But these are all things that we're definitely working on, and keep your eyes peeled is probably what I would say. But probably a few months out for the Accelerator repo, but it's definitely being worked on. And that's it for ALZ Bicep. Now, we asked this question last time, and Jan is probably smiling right now because Jan is leading a lot of the efforts on this work stream that we're thinking about. But we're starting on a new work stream internally about Evergreen, and Evergreen, really, we're still trying to scope what that really means. So the question here is, what does Evergreen mean to you? So in this survey for this community call, there is a blank text box field. We would love for you to tell us what Evergreen means to you in terms of Azure landing zones. For me, as an example, I think it's just about how do we stay up to date with the policy definitions and assignments that we would make as part of Azure landing zones. I think that's what Evergreen means to most of the customers that I work with and the things that I see in the field. But we really want to hear from you. If you're looking for a one-click button that updates all your network and brings you in alignment, great. We want to hear about it. Let us know, because we're in that scoping phase right now. So yeah, please do let us know on the survey. And that is it. Hopefully that has been interesting and you've got some value out of this call today. And we'd really love to open it up for Q&A. So if anybody's got any questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and then I can let people come off mute once I work out how to do that. But I can individually unmute you all very quickly. So yeah, feel free to post in the chat if you've got any questions, and we'll go from there. Great question, Jimmy. Hopefully it's a bank holiday for me today, so I am going to stop working as soon as this call is over and go back to enjoying the rest of my bank holiday. I will work on this tomorrow, so hopefully from tomorrow afternoon I will get it up and online and ready to share along with the slide deck as well. And you'll be able to find that at, let me find the short link for you. I think it is aka.ms/aoslee/community. I will double check that link before I post it in the chat. But I think that'll be the one that will get you to where you need to go. Cool. Yeah, I will find a link and make sure you get it, and I'll tweet it anyway. So if you're following me on Twitter, you'll definitely find it. But yes, we'll push it there. So that'll be very, very soon. Any other questions from anybody else? All right. Well, it looks like there's no more questions. Obviously, as always, hopefully I've emphasized this enough. If you do have questions, you want to ask anything to the team, GitHub issues or discussions are really the best place and the quickest way to get hold of us. We all monitor them constantly, so please feel free to raise it on the relevant repo if you know what repo that is, or if you're unsure, just raise it on any of them and we'll pick that up and put it in the right place and make sure you get an answer back. But really want to keep hearing from you guys and improving this to make sure it's helping you and your customers or your own deployments accelerate. We really want this to be something you can depend on and take a lot of good work from the team, and it hopefully accelerate a lot of your efforts internally. So with that, we'll bring the call to a close, and have a great rest of your day, everyone, and we'll get this call up very, very shortly for you all to share wider with the community, and we'll run this again hopefully just before the end of the next quarter, so sort of just before July. So we are going to get better at running these at least once a quarter, so apologies for the delay on the last one, but we will definitely be running one in the next sort of just before July, and I'll get an invite and an issue raised for that very shortly. All right, thank you everybody for joining, and have a great rest of your day.